Hello literature connoisseurs. Let's begin Chapter 5 of Left Behind. Buck enters the bathroom and checks a special pouch in his jeans that holds thousands of dollars. While he's there, he remembers speaking to a coworker that is in charge of another branch of the newspaper he works for. They have some back and forth banter and we learn that they don't like each other. The tone changes to her trying to convert Buck. She tried pushing that God supposedly showed himself to Buck by destroying the Russian invasion. That was 3 days before the flight when the rapture happened. So the 3 days were after the interview and Russian invasion. This still makes no sense because to read this portion it sounds as if he is returning to the US on Rayford's flight when Rayford describes the flight as leaving the US. So the authors can't make up their mind on where the plane is going. Maybe it's just flying donuts in the middle of the ocean. They finally clarify what is going on. Buck is traveling to London after he received a tip from a friend and he boarded the plane Rayford was flying. Took them long enough to make sense out of what was going on. Buck moves on to thinking about a conspiracy theorist as he tells Buck about a secret organization. The guy, named Dirk, tells Buck that the world is run by this secret organization. The authors say that Buck is amused by Dirk but doesn't believe him. Dirk goes on to say he is not a conspiracy theorist but his secret organization is real because he heard it from his fathers, brothers, nephews, cousins, former roommate. So you know it's true. That person is supposedly the stenographer for those powerful individuals. Dirk continues his ranting by saying that the secret organization. I'm surprised they haven't named it the Illuminati yet. The secret organization is trying to bring about a one-world currency. This supposed boogeyman is what the Book of Revelations says will require people to take the mark of the beast. If you get that mark then you can never go to heaven, blah blah blah. Dirk goes on to say that a guy named Jonathan Stonegal is an American and the leader of the secret organization. Dirk says they plan to change the world's currencies into dollars, pounds, and yen. Guess they did not know about euros at the time. Or that the European Union would form. Of course Christians have been trying for years to paint the EU as leading to the one world currency, and the mark of the beast. You need to fear-monger your cult in order to keep them compliant. Buck knows Stonegal's name and because of the supposed power this guy has he believes Dirk. So he tries to get more intel out of Dirk. He learns that this secret cult has 10 members to it and that there were US presidents that would sit in the seats as one of the 10. Another theory the Bible states is that the world will be divided into 10 sections and the Antichrist will rule over those 10 nations. In the book of Daniel he supposedly saw a vision of a large statue made up of different metals. The final portion was the statue's feet that had 10 toes. Christians believe these 10 toes are the kingdom of the Antichrist. Scholars might say otherwise, but when do Christians actually listen to scholars unless they say what they wants to hear? Scholars believe that the book was written after the events unfolded but the narrative says they had not happened yet. Basically the authors shot an arrow into a tree and after it stuck the authors drew a target around the arrow and stated that their supposed prophecies were true. Another good example of prophecy is that you eat a hamburger then state that 3 days ago you had a vision stating that today you would eat a hamburger. A self-fulfilled prophecy isn't impressive. Also writing a supposed prophecy after the prophecy was said to have happened, is also in no way impressive. Dirk goes on and although I used a Spaceballs the movie quote to make fun of Dirk a few pages later Buck does almost the same. Another name pops up as we learn about Joshua Todd Cothran, a British man in charge of the Britain Stock Exchange. He is described as not being as buttoned down as the others. Buck then goes on to say that everything Dirk said had come true after the secret organization met with each other in France. So the reason for Buck's flight was that he was given another tip by his conspiracy theorist friend. Apparently Buck had become a conspiracy theorist. Hopefully he isn't going to drink the water that turns frogs gay. Or are we to ignore the bodies from the Sandy Hook shooting that conspiracy theorists say never happened? Ignoring the mountains of evidence that say otherwise. For individuals interested in challenging conspiracy thinking, the authors of the new review provide some tips. don't appeal to emotion. The research suggests that emotional strategies don't work to budge belief. Don't get sucked into factual arguments. Debates over the facts of a conspiracy theory or the consequences of believing in a particular conspiracy also fail to make much difference, the authors found. Focus on prevention. The best strategies seem to involve helping people recognize unreliable information and untrustworthy sources before they're exposed to a specific belief. Support education and analysis. Putting people into an analytic mindset and explicitly teaching them how to evaluate information appears most protective against conspiracy rabbit holes. Scene changes to Rayford and he is woken from sleeping with his wife's nightgown by Hattie. She asks if he learned anything and offers to keep him company now that his wife and son are gone, but he refuses. So Rayford is no longer interested in Hattie for some strange reason. He rationalizes that losing his wife and kid made him realize what a mistake being with her was. However, he never fully explains this reasoning, so again this just seems like more nonsense to the reader. To be honest, a more realistic approach would be that he was driven closer to her, and if he did nothing but talk about his missing wife, Hattie could use the excuse that he really doesn't care about her and they break up. But my wife vanished and I no longer want to see you doesn't make sense. This type of logic would be reasonable in someone that is a psychopath. Abnormal psychology focuses on abnormal behaviors that are considered not normal for a person. To the person suffering from abnormal psychology, their mind has a different way of thinking that may make sense to them but seem irrational to everyone else. So again the authors have created a psychopathic character. The problem is, do the authors see this as being reasonable or not? I'm inclined by the writings to believe the former. That in their psychopathic natures they think they have created a well-thought-out character when just the opposite is true. He lies to her by asking her to keep him posted on her family while his thoughts say he doesn't care in the slightest. Remember this because it will be important later. Scene changes to Buck as he leaves a message for the guy to charter the flight. We learn why Buck can't use his cell phone because it's unreliable. Probably because he keeps trying to take it apart to hook up his modem to it. I, personally, was born in the 70s and grew up before cell phones and computers were a thing. I was there when they were first mass-produced so that everyone that could afford one, could own one. When they first came out they were very reliable. The only times they failed was if you were out in the middle of the woods or there was a major storm happening. So unless Buck is miles away from the nearest cell phone tower or he's in the middle of a blizzard, his cell should work fine. Even more since only a few people seem to have cell phones in this novel, they should definitely work better than a landline. He gets upset that he calls his office, again, and has to leave more messages for the stenographer to call his conspiracy friend. He then calls Hattie and he tells her what he learned. She seemed grateful and seemed to pretend she didn't know anything even though she just told Rayford she knew about her family. Then she asks him to call her again because she feels scared and lonely. This is the exact behavior one would expect, and this should be Rayford and Hattie, not her and a stranger. So lastly Buck calls the woman co-worker that he doesn't get along with to ask her about where to stay in Chicago. He learns that she was taken in the rapture and that everyone in her family except her young son was taken. The kid was surprisingly calm about being the only one left behind. Here ends chapter 5. The next video I'm going to do a review of all 5 chapters together to summarize. There hasn't been much theology-wise to comment on, so I know their reviews have been a bit dry. See you next time.